You're listening to the Cash Podcast, creating affluence, success, and happiness with your financial surgeon, Adam Koch, President and Portfolio Manager at Libertas Wealth Management Group at libertaswealth.com.
All right. Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. Josh Kinzel is joining me today, and we're going to be talking about the chaotic process of enrolling in Medicare, getting a supplement policy, making changes to your current policies, reviewing them, and all your plans from a Medicare standpoint so that the process is easy, stress-free, and so that you have the best Medicare experience humanly possible. So let me jump right into introducing Josh. Josh Kinzel, he specializes in Medicare health plans, including Medicare supplements, Medicare Advantage plans, prescription drug plans. He served on the board of directors for Employment for Seniors and is a past president of the Columbus Metro chapter of BNI. He is a graduate of the Fisher School of Business at The Ohio State University, and he's been working alongside seniority benefit groups since, for about 14 years now, so since 2006. Now, just a quick note about Seniority Benefit Group. They're a Medicare advisory firm here in Columbus, Ohio. They help people through the chaotic and confusing world of supplement policies, including the enrollment process for Medicare, and as people near, say, 65 years of age and or as they're closing in on retirement. They currently have more than 9,500 beneficiaries they're working with, and they're considered to be the leading Medicare firm in Central Ohio. So, Josh, thanks so much for joining me.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Yeah, really appreciate it. This is one of those topics, and especially as we're moving into that time frame of open enrollment, I think this is a great topic to tell people about. And honestly, I just don't think there's a whole lot of education out there unless you go looking for it.
Yeah, and what happens a lot of times is folks want that education, but if they go down the wrong avenue to get it, they're just bombarded with calls, and it's just information they don't really want. So we do try to get the message out that we are here and we can help with that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we even get started, because you said when you say they get bombarded, I usually kind of see the aftermath. You know, if I get a hold of them ahead of time, obviously I'm sending them your way. But if I don't, then usually I just hear the stories of being bombarded by insurance companies after the fact, and then of course all the spam that comes thereafter. But before we even get started, can you explain a little bit about what this process is like? Just because, again, I've heard that it's generally no fun at all.
Yeah. Well, and from doing it for 14 years, you do see a lot of people come in with the same general anxiety toward it, because what happens is most of these folks have been working for a large company or working for a company just in general that has offered benefits, and they have always been presented those benefits. You elect it during open enrollment, and now you're retiring and you need to make that decision on your own. So there's that anxiety of, okay, now somebody isn't making the decision for me. I have to do it by myself. And then you hear a lot of the different phrases like penalties and forever, and you need to do this. And it just creates this just whole pile of butterflies in your stomach about what to do. And where I think we take the most pride in is if we can get them early, Adam, if we can get them before they get too riddled with anxiety around it, I think we can smooth that process out, because it's not as hard as what people think. There aren't as many choices as what they believe there to be. And that's kind of a good thing. So we try to get there prior to them getting too overwhelmed with it, and just guide them through it and tell them you don't have to do a lot of things that you're hearing right now.
Sure. Yeah. So you work for the government?
That's a common question. And no, we don't. And in everything that we have to send out to folks or talk to folks, we do not work for the government. We're not endorsed by the government, but we are educated in the Medicare space, and we have to get re-educated every summer. There's a litany of tests that we have to take, just because the government wants to make sure that people who are talking about Medicare are well educated in that field, which I get, but we aren't an employee of the government. No, we're independent agents trying to guide you to the right plan. All
right, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Can you mentioned penalties a second ago? Yeah. Can you explain some of the penalties involved with Medicare, and whether it's mandatory or not, and just kind of how to avoid the penalties that it might exist?
Yeah, the most common misconception, that the most common call we get is somebody who's 64 and a half. And they say, well, I'm still working, or most of them say, I'm still working. I don't really want to get into Medicare yet, potentially, but I know if I don't do something now, I'm going to be penalized forever. If I don't jump into the system, if I don't call Medicare to tell them that I'm turning 65, then I'm going to be penalized. And there can be penalties, but they are very, very easily avoidable. So where a penalty would come into play is if you were coming in to the age of 65 and you're eligible for Medicare and you don't have any insurance coming into it, and you decide not to pick it up at 65. Then at 67, you come back in and say, well, maybe I do need that. Maybe I didn't want it at 65, but I want it now. That's where you're going to be penalized. But for most folks, if you still have insurance through an employer or insurance through your spouse who is still working, all Medicare needs to see is that you've been covered since turning 65. So you avoid those penalties by just having insurance, which most people have. And so it really takes them down a notch a little bit when they call and say, well, I think I don't want to be penalized forever. So what do I need to do? Well, what you need to do is just maintain insurance.
Why would somebody not have insurance for a period of time, especially if they're not working? And Medicare, I don't want to say it's free. Obviously, it's not free, but I mean, it's not like, the insurance I'm paying right now. Why would somebody not be insured?
It's extremely uncommon.
Okay.
People are insured in some fashion at this point, and especially because the Affordable Care Act making things available to folks, even with some health conditions. I don't get a call from somebody who doesn't have insurance necessarily, but depending on what type of insurance you have does trigger whether or not you need Medicare at 65 or if you can delay it.
Okay.
So it's very rare that I do find somebody in a situation where they don't have insurance. So again, making it very rare that somebody will actually have a penalty later on. They're going to be covered in some fashion.
So if you retire at 65 and you enroll in Medicare, you're good. If you don't retire at 65 and you keep working, but you're covered by your employer's insurance policy, you're good.
You're still good.
If you, for whatever reason, I don't know why you would do this, but if you retire at 64 and you pay for your own insurance and then you hit 65 and you just, for whatever reason, forget to enroll in Medicare, and you continue your insurance through, say, the government program, the ACA, then you're still good, right?
Yeah, there are certain caveats to that, and really two basic ones. So let's assume everybody has insurance approaching that age, whether it is through an employer or an individual plan. There's really three different categories. Are you working for an employer that has more than 20 employees, or is your spouse working for an employer more than 20 employees? If so, you don't have to enroll in Medicare because that employer plan will remain primary to Medicare.
Okay.
If you work for a smaller company, so let's say an employer less than 20 employees, we will want to have that discussion of as soon as you become eligible for Medicare, at that point, Medicare does become primary to your group health plan. So we do help folks in that specific situation say, all right, let's talk about Medicare and why we need to add this now. And similar for the Affordable Care Act, if somebody's on an individual plan, that plan becomes secondary to Medicare at 65. So we do want to talk about adding Medicare at that point.
Got it. So I got it. That makes sense. So that kind of answers the question, I guess. My next question was going to be, do I have to have Medicare or do I need to add it if I'm still working? And I guess the answer is it depends, it sounds like. Is that right?
The answer is it depends. And what the quick answer is, as long as you're still working, especially for a large employer, you don't technically have to do anything with Medicare. So you may want to do something because there are parts of Medicare that don't cost any additional premium. So when we get into talking about a brief overview of what Medicare is, I'll touch on what does cost and what doesn't. So you may want to add part of it, but if you're still working, you can delay it without penalty. So it's not mandatory, but we still want to have that discussion with you prior to 65 to say in your specific situation, here's what you may want to think about doing.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Now, you know what? I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's rewind for a second. Maybe for those people who don't understand, those who are kind of rookies in this process, which now that I think about it, it's probably everyone, as you don't enroll from it in Medicare twice, right? So it's kind of only the first time and that's it. Can you describe maybe just what the different options are, from a 30,000 foot view?
Yeah. So if we take a pause and say, all right, let's say you are just somebody who's turned 65, you don't have employer insurance, and you need to know the basic pieces of Medicare and how they work together. I'll take a couple minutes here to go over that. So
Perfect.
There is original Medicare, which is through the government, not an insurance company. It's between you and the government. And there's two parts to that. There's Part A, which is hospitalization, and Part B, which is anything outside of the hospital. So that's what has always been original Medicare. And so that's at the age of 65, you can enroll in that. And those two parts they work together to give you about an 80% plan.
Okay.
And so you go to the doctor, hospital, surgery. If you have original Medicare A and B, it's going to cover about 80% of that cost. Now, you'll have to pay for part of that. So Part A is that free part where if you are turning 65 and maybe if you're still working, you add Part A because it doesn't cost you any extra. That could be used as secondary insurance. Part B is the one that has a standard monthly premium that you start to pay of about $150 right now. It's $148.50.
Okay.
Now that premium can go up based on income. So I know some of your clients, Adam, would run into that situation. It's called IRMA.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yep. And that's something that we certainly talk about a lot when we're talking about these costs. But so A and B of Medicare, if we just say in general, standard costs for that's about $150, and it's buying you an 80% plan.
Okay.
But what it doesn't address, it doesn't have a limit to that 20% that's your responsibility. So you could be riding along using your Medicare card and it's paying 80%, you're paying 20, but you don't have a limit. There's not a time where they say, all right, you've spent 10,000 or 20,000, now you're done. So folks realize that, all right, well, what do I do about that 20%? And we haven't talked about anything about prescriptions yet. So what do I do about my prescriptions?
Right.
And so you need to add Medicare A and B. You have to have that 80% as a starting point, but then you're at a fork in the road of two basic choices. So like I alluded to earlier, it seems like there's a million different ways to go, but there's really two basic ways to go. You either add a supplement, Medigap plan. These are your traditional Plan Fs, Plan Gs, what some of your neighbors and friends may have. But what those do is just fill in that 20%.
Okay.
So original Medicare pays its 80%. We buy a supplement through a private insurance company. They cover the other 20%. So it keeps it pretty simple. Then we add a prescription drug plan on top of that to address your prescriptions.
Okay.
So one path, you have A, B, supplement, and Part D, your drug plan.
Okay.
The other basic path is these Medicare Advantage plans. And these are the ones that, if you've ever watched TV in the fall, then you're seeing Joe Namath talk about these different plans that are available to you. And that's the basic type of plan that he's addressing is these Part C. So these are Medicare Advantage where you have to have A and B, but then you have this plan that wraps around that and it looks and feels a lot like what you're used to through an employer and individual policy where you have a network of doctors that we have to stay within. We have some co-pays that we have to be aware of, but maybe we pay a little bit lower premium for that. So you have these parts that mix together. And everybody does choose to go a different path just based on where they are financially or what medications they're taking or what type of risk they want to take on. But you really have two basic paths. Do we go with a Medicare supplement and drug plan or a Medicare Advantage plan? And
and one more time, just briefly, what's the difference between the A and B, or not A and B, because I don't want to confuse Medicare Part A and B, but what's the basic difference between the two options to the end user?
Yeah. So with a supplement and a drug plan, what you're doing is you're giving yourself the freedom to go anywhere that they take Medicare. You have very little out of pocket if you use the plan. So this is for someone who is risk adverse, saying, hey, I'd rather prepay up front when something were to come up. So with the supplement, you're paying more per month in the ballpark of maybe $140, $150 a month for that, to have the freedom to go wherever you want, cross state lines, go anywhere that they take Medicare, and have very little out of pocket when you use it. With a Medicare Advantage plan, that second path, what you're trading off is a lot of times these don't have any premiums, which make them very, very attractive to folks because you don't pay a premium, but what you're doing is you're taking on some risk in the form of networks. So now we're looking at Central Ohio at least and saying, all right, which hospital systems do you want to stay within? So we have to look for a plan that has those hospitals in. And you're also taking on some risk in the form of copays. So when you go to a doctor, you're going to pay a copay. If you go to the hospital, you'll pay a copay. And then those copays could add up to a couple $1,000 out of pocket. Okay. So with the two choices, supplement and drug plan, pay more up front, but for freedom and lower out of pocket if you use it. Medicare Advantage, pay less up front and more of a pay as you go type of approach.
Yeah, tough to tell what you'll end up paying at the end of the day with option two with Advantage. But generally speaking, I'd say $300 a month is what people could expect to pay when they include A, B, drugs, and a sup. Is that right?
Yep. That's about right. At the age of 65, and that's per person per month. Yeah.
Okay. A lot. You mentioned IRMA a second ago. A lot of our clients run into issues over the years with IRMA. Can you? I don't know that a lot of people know what that is, or until they run into it, it's kind of like one of those things you don't know until you step on the landmine.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So that's specifically designed for if somebody has a higher income, then you will pay more than the standard amount for your Medicare benefits. So the standard amount, like I had mentioned, is $148.50 right now. So anybody who makes less than $88,000 as an individual or $176,000 as a couple pays that standard amount. But as you can imagine, people are above that amount. So what happens there? And they charge you more for those benefits in the form of this income related monthly adjustment amount, or IRMA. So when people get into Medicare and they start having this discussion, and we're talking through, and they say, okay, well, I've done some basic research. I know Medicare Part B costs $148.50. And I paused them for a second. I said, well, it could cost $148.50, but let's look at your income. And Medicare looks back 2 years. So let's say you have, So let's say you have somebody who's aging into Medicare, turned 65, November of this year, and now they're signed up for Medicare. Well, Medicare is going to say, all right, you can come in, you're 65, that's fine. But we're going to check with the IRS from your tax returns from 2019 to see if we're going to charge you more than standard amount.
Interesting. Okay.
So if they find your income higher than that 88 as an individual or 176 as a couple, they're going to come back and tell you how much more they're going to charge. And it can be up to, instead of the standard amount of $148.50, it could go all the way up to about $505 a month, depending on that income.
Okay.
So that, when we're talking to folks who are deciding, do I retire? Do I go on Medicare? Do I keep my group plan? That is a huge part of that discussion, as you would imagine. Now, it's not something that always stays with you, though. So if someone is retiring and they say, okay, look, I'm retiring, they're going to look back 2 years and charge me this higher amount, but I no longer make that income. There is an appeal process that we can help folks through as well.
Nice.
So don't be scared that, all right, yeah, I've been a high income earner my whole career, but now in retirement, I'm going to shift some of that around. It's not going to reflect that higher income. I don't want to be charged more from what I did 2 years ago. And they allow you to appeal it right away. And it ultimately catches up because they always look back those 2 years.
Right. So you help, I was going to ask that you kind of take the stress and the burden off the client in terms of going through that or navigating that process, then that appeal process.
Yeah. And again, it's the one thing that the government does well in this space is, they're going to charge you more for income, which could be argued here or there, but they do allow you to come back and at least appeal some of these decisions that they've made. So we don't have to live with that higher amount if income is going to change. And it doesn't affect everybody, but a lot of times when people are transitioning into retirement, it can.
Depends.
Yeah, and it absolutely depends. So we're there to guide you through that process as well. So we try to be that. You come to us, we explain your specific situation with you. We tell you how to navigate some of these things, and don't stress out when you see a letter from the government that says they're going to charge you more, which do feel very intimidating. But we're here as a sidekick to kind of ride along with you with us.
Yep. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just say you go through the appeal process and you succeed to the fullest extent. What does the IRS consider income in retirement?
Yeah. So not a tax professional here, but how it's been explained to me, it's your adjusted gross income that they're looking at. So it's
AGI.
anything that's taxable, AGI.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair. Okay. Well, and why wouldn't, if I'm, 64 and a half, why wouldn't I just say, you know what, I'm just going to go directly to an insurance company and just cut out the middleman, so to speak?
Yeah. That's a common question because you're seeing all these ads from all these insurance companies, and at no point are you seeing an ad for Seniority Benefit Group necessarily. So people might be thinking like, well, where do you fit into this puzzle?
Sure.
Where we fit in is we're licensed with all those companies. So yes, you can absolutely call the insurance company, their 1-800 number, and have them tell you exactly why you should enroll in their particular plan. Whether you're a square peg and they're a round hole, they're going to tell you why it should fit. But where we come into play is we actually look at that whole landscape. So yeah, we can talk about those plans, but we can also say, well, yeah, I mean, it might look attractive on that commercial, but here's the reason why you might want to go this different direction. We consolidate that conversation for folks. And the beauty is it's not as if you're paying us any extra to do that. We're compensated from the insurance companies. It's the same exact fee as if you were to call their 1-800 number or work through someone local like us who can look at the whole field. That your cost on your end doesn't change. And then we can kind of help you shepherd through that that chaos of which one to choose, and you don't have the whole weekend to call these numbers. You can just talk to us and we can tell you why maybe this company works better for the others. So it's a way that on the front end, we can see the whole picture, not just one narrow focused view of where you should go. And then year to year, we also say, okay, well, we helped you with one plan last year. Is that still the best for the following year? And so we get back involved every fall.
Okay.
And that's where we are. We're on the doorstep of that open enrollment right now.
I guess that I think you probably answered my other question here, but about all those websites that I've seen, we have a lot of our clients will ask about, well, what if I just go straight to a website? I can put my contact info in and they'll give me the best rate for all the companies. First of all, sounds too good to be true. Second of all, I started thinking about privacy. What would you say to that?
Well, one thing I will give people credit for, what I've noticed over the past 14 years is that people do want to be a little bit more self-sufficient. They want to come in at least to the conversation with a little bit of baseline knowledge. And so you go online, you start to do some research, and these websites are designed to make it seem as if, oh, no harm, no foul, just give us your number, give us your age, and we'll just show you everything. And at first it is one of those where it feels too good to be true that I'm just going to type in a few basic pieces of information and it's going to be revealed to me what I should do. And they make it look like it's very, very easy. So I don't fault people for going online to try to find those. But what they realize very quickly, as soon as you put any information out there online, then that information is sold to anybody that wants to buy it, to call you, to pester you, to try to bait you into going their direction, to use fear tactics, because that's the only real way that somebody calling from California can make you, who have never talked to them, who is unsolicited phone call, to all of a sudden feel comfortable and enough to go through them. And so be cautious. And like you said, Adam, a lot of these online advertisements, a lot of these commercials withhold a lot of the pieces that people really do care about. They only sugarcoat what everything will look like. So you can certainly do some research on your own, but just be very, very careful about putting in any information there because you will get bombarded if you do.
Phone calls, emails, next thing you know, you're changing your email address because you can't unsubscribe fast enough. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then from what you were saying earlier, it sounds to me like, whether you go directly to the insurance company, call an 800 number, directly, if they work with you, if they go online, if they send, I don't know, homing pigeons, Pony Express, somebody's getting paid no matter what, and it's the same fee.
Yep. And for you as a consumer, that's zero. So it just matters who you want to go through, who do you want there to shepherd you through that process.
Okay.
And,
So now you mentioned open enrollment, which I believe takes place between, I think it starts October 15th. I always remember that because it's the extension filing deadline, but October 15th to December 7th. So it's not a lot of time. It's about 8 weeks or so, 9 weeks. What are some of the reasons that somebody who already has a plan, already has something in place, would want to review that plan and potentially make a change during that time period?
Yeah, so that's where our office gets really, really busy because we don't just help you on the front end. We do help you every fall as well during this open enrollment time because we realize it is a ongoing discussion that you have to have. And most of the time, the good news is when you've chosen a plan with a legitimate insurance company, they're trying to keep their plans consistent because they don't want you to leave. So the overwhelming thought is what you have, unless something has changed drastically, probably will continue to be a good option for you the next year. But some of the glaring reasons you may want to change your plan is if, for instance, if you've moved or if you're looking at new doctors and maybe we need to find a different plan that has a new doctor, especially the medications. The medications are a fixed cost for a lot of folks that those do need to be reined in somehow. There has to be some better solution to this. But what we find is when somebody changes a medication, which happens quite often, is they need that review to find the best plan for them. And really what we are finding too, the discussion that we have during the fall are a lot of people who are on maybe a Medicare supplement where they are paying this premium and they're seeing all these commercials about these Medicare Advantage plans. And when we describe them to people, they say, well, that is a risk I'm willing to take. So if it is something where you have a supplement, you're paying for that, and as you age, that supplement has gone up, and you just want a refresher of what your options are, that could be another reason to make a change. But So even if it's just to review what you currently have, that's what we're open here to do. And sometimes when people call our office and they say, here's the plan that we have, and we'll tell them, you know what, that's a good plan. Keep that going. If we find something in that review that we would suggest a different pathway, we certainly will help you get to that other pathway. But that doesn't mean just because you call us, we're going to try to change you to a different policy.
And can you take over the service side of a client's current plan if they come for review and there is no need for a change?
Potentially, yeah, sure. There are some companies that allow us to become the agent of record on the account. But even we also pride ourselves on, yes, we know that everybody's making a living. Everybody wants to certainly put food on the table, however you want to say that. But we also know that we are a resource, an educational resource, and want to be there for folks, and don't want people to have the stigma of we're going to call them and they're going to try to find something wrong with what we currently have. So there are a lot of times we have these conversations with folks and say, hey, look, we can't get involved at the moment, but what you have is a good plan. So we're not going to actually make any financial gains from this conversation. But we've also learned over the course of time here, a lot of times when we tell somebody that, they're the ones that are willing to say, hey, look, they're motivated to tell their neighbor, and their neighbor is somebody we can help. So there are situations where we can take over that service model for you, but not in all cases. But we are here as a resource. So even if we can't take over as the agent of record, we do still want to help.
Well, it's ironic you say that because if you remember, the reason you and I met was because I had a client who was extremely happy with you, and she says, hey, you need to start talking to this guy and about your other clients. So I think the case in point, even if somebody doesn't need any help, there's no shortage of people turning 65 every day who need help like this. And I know you mentioned that people generally want to get educated these days. I would not to argue with that statement. I think that there's a spectrum. I think that there's people at one end of the spectrum that just love to just research until they're blue in the face. I think there's people at the other end of the spectrum that they're so confused and frustrated with the process that they don't even want to call anybody. So they procrastinate as long as humanly possible until, I don't want to say until it's too late, but until it's the 11th hour. Yeah, and then there's everybody in the middle. And I would argue there's probably more people who want help to make it easier than there are people that would rather spend the time that they'd otherwise be spending with their friends, family, and doing things they enjoy doing, and spending that time researching Medicare options. So that's just my opinion. And I own a business.
Agree. Totally agree. Where it's the end of a month and it's the week before the next month starts, and somebody calls and says, well, I'm turning 65 next month. What do I need to do? Or I need to get enrolled next week. You're right. But then there are other people who call 3 years in advance and say, I'm just trying to get all my ducks in a row. But yeah, what we really just want to get out to folks is we can consolidate that conversation. We can make it a whole lot easier. We take the burden of all that research off of you, because this is what we do every day. So don't waste your time unless you really just like going through and reading all these different websites, which is fine too. But we're here to help maybe shorten that time frame needed to really digest and realize which way to go.
Teach his own. I mean, if it's stock charts, I could spend 12 hours with very few breaks staring at stock charts all day. I could analyzing mortgage options with multiple properties, or creating a really interesting, intricate charitable planning estate plan that involves tax deductions and tax-free income. That really, I get into that. It's not even work, it's fun. But the idea of enrolling, when I turned 65, the idea of enrolling in Medicare, no interest at all. None.
Well,
zero.
Well, and it's funny too, because everybody is different. So I look at it as a puzzle, and so there's a reason why I've been doing this as long as I have, and have no real desire to get out of this space. I really feel like I'm helping folks. And for me, it's that puzzle of figuring out a combination of your financial needs and how that fits into your decision here with your health insurance. So it's great that there are professionals in each of these sectors here that enjoy what they do. So the actual consumer can go on living their life doing what they like to do.
For sure. Yeah. Well, that's a good segue. Why don't I share your contact information? And for those of you that are listening, the contact information will be on our website, or you can email us. You can go to our website, contact me personally. or do the submission, the online submission form, and we'll shoot you back Josh's information. But his phone number is 614-799-1403. Again, that's 614-799-1403. And his extension is 225. Email address is KIN as in Nancy, ZEL at S as in Sam, B as in boy, G as in George, 65.com. So Kinzel at SBG65, like when you need to enroll in Medicare.com. And again, there's seniority benefit group. If you just want to go straight to the website and check them out, that's SBG65.com. And like I said, I'll be putting this in the YouTube information, the notes as well. And we might even put together an article here in the next month or so before Josh gets too busy with open enrollment to send out to you as well. But thanks so much again for joining, Josh. I really appreciate it.
Oh, great time. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
No, you're welcome. Well, that's it today's show. Feel free to share this episode with your friends and family. And if you'd like to discuss your personal situation further, if you'd like a second opinion on your Medicare supplement plan as open enrollment comes up, please let us know, or again, contact Josh directly. If you'd like a second opinion on your retirement plan, estate plan, investment management, you know that you can always reach out to us for an intro call, and you never ever have to be a client to ask a question. As always, I always say that there's thousands and thousands of podcasts out there. You gave it, you chose to give ours a listen today, and I really appreciate that. So thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe both on iTunes and YouTube. And remember, you can sign up at libertaswealth.com, not only to get emailed with these updates for podcasts, but also articles, screencasts, and other videos that we do delivered directly to your inbox. Feel free to follow us on Facebook at libertaswealth.com it's facebook.com/libertaswealth. I'm also on Twitter at Adam Koch and on Instagram at Financial Surgeon. So thank you so much once again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Cash Podcast with your financial surgeon, Adam Koch. To see any charts or images that were mentioned in this show, or to check out additional articles, videos, and other educational resources, head over to libertaswealth.com.